To my guest, his name is Alexander Nekrassov. He's a former Kremlin advisor. We thought we'd get a Russian perspective on how it's all gone. Well, Alexander, welcome again.
Thank you.
How was it for you?
How was it for me? Well, first of all, I thought that it was a bit rude of the British press to say that President Putin is isolated, even before he was isolated, and he wasn't isolated, actually.
Wasn't he?
Well, I thought he wasn't, because, you see, the problem is that America, France, and Britain, they want to arm the Syrian rebels, but the rest don't. Chancellor Angela Merkel doesn't want to do that, the Italians don't want to do that, and the Japanese don't want to do it. The Canadians, they don't really matter, do they? So we have a bit of a sort of, not like
Can I just apologise to all our Canadian listeners?
Of course. No, I meant that, as a G8 son, because there is no China there. You see, once China is not there, you can offend anybody, basically.
Why isn't China there? Why isn't it? It should be there, shouldn't it?
Of course it should have been there, because China is also against, it's exactly the same position as Russia, and that would have been a different situation altogether. So basically what happened was that Putin was not isolated, he played his cards right, and now we have a communiqué saying, well, we all want to have peace in Syria. Well, guess what? We knew that, basically, all of us. And I think that, in my opinion, every G8 summit is a political catwalk. It's like the host, leader, he's allowed to be the world statesman. So he's saying things and everybody applauds him. The rest are trying to show unity, even if there's none there. And basically they don't really decide much, because it's the Sherpas who decide everything before the meeting.
Well, that's the case in all international summits, isn't it? There's nothing unusual in that. But do you think anything tangible has emerged from this summit? I mean, obviously on Syria there was clear disagreement, but on tax evasion there seems to have been a little bit of progress on that. This trade deal between the European Union and the United States, I mean, that's something concrete.
Well, there was a very strange thing about privatizing hostage-taking, wasn't it? That the governments have decided not to pay for hostages. So you imagine all the hostages who are there, being held by terrorists across the world, now having this difficult time, let's put it this way. And I bet you, by the way, if they ever take hostage a minister, they will pay. They will pay whatever the price is. So that was weird. I thought the tax thing is strange as well, because so they're going to go after all the tax evaders across the world, basically, as I understand it. But isn't it a better thing for governments not to waste money in the first place? Now that's, then they wouldn't have to have those desperate measures and go after everyone. Although, of course, I would say if they are going to press and get those big boys of business to pay tax, that's a good thing, although I doubt it very much.
Well, because, I mean, it's been quite a difficulty for the Russian government, hasn't it, to collect taxes?
Not necessarily, because what Putin did, that he introduced a 13% flat tax. So even our big boys are paying, because it's really better to pay rather than to have all the hassle with the taxman. So I don't think it can work here. And no way, it's like poll tax.
13% flat rate, I'll take some of that. Well, look, let's go back to Syria, because I think a lot of people in this country are rather perplexed by the Russian position on Syria. Why is Syria so important to President Putin? Why is he willing to arm President Assad, somebody who clearly is butchering his own people?
Well, first of all, the important thing to understand is that Russia does not want Assad to stay on, as everybody says, forever. Russia wants Assad to leave, but in a situation where there is sort of a order is there still, and that there are talks being held and so on. So it's not like Russia wants him to stay. But if he goes suddenly, there will be chaos. Because those people who are fighting against the government, they're well armed now. By the way, I saw in one of the British newspapers a report that 3,000 anti-aircraft missiles disappeared from Libya. Now guess where they are? Of course they are in Syria. And that's, by the way, another thing about Syria, is that the shadow of Libya was hanging over this summit.
Well, the other thing is I do think the situation has changed, and I don't understand why David Cameron seems to be so keen on arming the Syrian rebels. They don't need arming. They're getting all of their arms from Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. That's the big question that Putin probably asked him during that 10 Downing Street conversation, saying to him, they're being armed. We're not arming one side by the other side. If they were not armed, how on earth would they have managed to hold on for 2 years against a regular army? So that's a very simple, that's not a one-sided army anyway. A one-sided conflict anyway. And the point here is this. Russia wants Assad to leave as well. And our foreign minister said that several times. We're not holding to Assad. We want this conflict not to become a bloodbath. And that's the whole point of it. But always we can hear commentators saying, oh, Russia wants him to stay on forever. No, it doesn't. And as regards long-term interests, well, I can hit you back with another question. How come America and Britain are keeping the Saudis, the royal family, in power when there were rebellions against them, they were smashed immediately and so on? It's the same situation. These are strategic interests of all nations. And when I hear people saying, well, it's Cold War days back, well, it's not. These are national interests being defended.
It could be, though. This could be a sort of almost a war by proxy, couldn't it? I mean, that's what, I don't know if you saw in one of the newspapers at the weekend, it may have been the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday, there was a big 2-page spread about how this could lead to World War III. Now, I think that was a fairly apocalyptic
I think it's actually quite possible, because
Really?
I wrote an article myself on my own website saying that this can lead to Third World III, because the reason being is that Israel is very vulnerable. Imagine if Syria just starts to break up and there's going to be chaos and there's going to be Al-Qaeda units armed with, well, all sorts of weaponry. Israel cannot defend itself. What if the nuclear weapons will come into play? I think it's quite a possible scenario. It's a terrible scenario. I'm not saying it's... And I hope that probably Mr. Putin did mention this possibility to Mr. Cameron and others.
Do you think this so-called peace conference is actually going to happen? I hope that David Cameron was talking about arming the rebels as a sort of negotiating tool to get President Assad to come to some sort of peace conference, but there's no date set, we don't know when it will be, we don't know who's going to take part, it all seems a bit nebulous.
I don't think there will be a peace conference in Geneva in the next several months until they all get together at the UN, because there's no basis for it, because once America and Britain said they've used the chemical weapons, they've crossed the red line, the rebels now will never talk to anybody, they're waiting for those weapons.
Yeah.
And by saying that, they basically wiped off that chance of having this conference, maybe after the General Assembly, maybe.
And what difference do you think the new Iranian president is going to make in any of this?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if anybody knows, actually. My gut feeling is that he's exactly the same as the rest.
Oh, he seems to smile quite nicely, which is a start.
Well, it is a start, of course, but, looking at the Iranian politics and when the supreme leader is still there and all the boys from the National Guard, whatever they call themselves these days, they're still there.
Revolutionary Guard.
And they control something like 50% of the economy. I doubt it very much that they will allow him to do anything at all.
Now, I was right that you have upset the Canadians. Colin says, as an expat living in Canada, I must say that your commentator owes an apology to all Canadians. To claim that Canada, a country with a more stable economy than any other G8 country, excuse me, none of our banks needed any bailouts, doesn't matter at the G8 is silly, whether in reference to Syria or economic matters.
Right, okay, well, let me put this way. Maybe I put it in the wrong wording, because Canada is a wonderful country. My friends live there and they say they love it. They do anticipate, by the way, a financial crisis coming, because that guy who is now going to be the Bank of England's governor here, he did some things that might work not to their benefit.
Yes, he's coming. A couple of weeks, he's going to turn up. Mark Carney.
He's going to shower the banks with money, won't he?
Is he? Well,
that's what they're saying.
I hope he doesn't, because I think that would be an absolute disaster.
But the point is that it was not about Canada I was talking about. I was talking about the Prime Minister. And by the way, his name always escapes me. I don't know whether you know his name.
Stephen.
Okay, well, let's call him Stephen. He's a young man anyway.
Isn't that terrible? I don't know.
The point is that the problem is here that I didn't really mean Canada as a nation. I meant that does Canada really... Is Canada bigger than China or India when it comes to the economy? I don't think so. And the point is that I was only implying that when you have the G8, the biggest, most industrialized countries in the world, China seems to be asking to be G9 or something, even if Canada stays on. because everybody basically is used to that.